He's one of the most successful British artists of all time, the very picture of wholesome integrity. But on a sunny afternoon in August 2014, Sir Cliff Richard's world was shattered. The sound of helicopter blades roared over his home as police swarmed the property. For 2 long years, he was dragged through an absolute public nightmare, his name dragged through the mud across the globe. Now, at 84 years old, he's finally confessing the full, devastating truth of that ordeal and the secrets he's held onto for a lifetime. He's revealing just how massive the toll of that public crucifixion really was, and how close it came to destroying him completely. For over 65 years, Cliff Richard hasn't just been a pop star, he's been a permanent fixture in our lives, the soundtrack for generations. Think about it, he's the only artist in history to have a top 5 album in 8 different decades. That's incredible. But behind that squeaky clean image and the endless list of hits, there has always been a fiercely private man. Now, with his memoir, A Head Full of Music, he's finally pulling back the curtain. The book is part celebration of a wild career and part raw, personal confession. It gets into the untold stories, the private heartbreaks, and the deep faith that saw him through his darkest days. This isn't just a look back at a life in music, it's the final word from a man taking back his own story, telling us about the massive weight he was forced to carry and the immense strength it took to survive it, before the screaming fans and the gold records, and long before he was Sir Cliff, he was just Harry Webb, a young boy born in Lucknow, India, in 1940. His early life couldn't have been more different from the rock and roll world that would later make him famous. His dad managed a catering company for the Indian Railways, and he remembers a stable, loving home. But when India gained its independence in 1948, everything changed. The Webb family, like many Anglo-Indians, made the tough journey to England. They didn't arrive to streets paved with gold. They landed in the harsh reality of post-war Britain, with the family starting out in a single room in Surrey. It was a real struggle, but it's also where Cliff Richard's resilience was born. In his memoir, he talks about a family life built on faith and looking out for each other, values that would become his anchor when fame hit. The music didn't happen overnight. He first got into the skiffle craze that was sweeping Britain. But the real light bulb moment came on a Saturday morning in 1956. A 15-year-old Harry Webb was walking down the street when he heard a sound blasting from a parked car that just stopped him in his tracks. It was raw, rebellious, and filled with an energy he'd never felt before. The song was Heartbreak Hotel by Elvis Presley. In that one moment, a fire was lit. This was the sound he'd been waiting for. As he tells it, that blast of American rock and roll gave him the thrill, the purpose and the mission that has shaped his life ever since. Harry Webb, the boy from India, had found his calling. He was about to become Cliff Richard, the kid who would take that American sound and turn it into something that would start a revolution in British music. The change from Harry Webb to Cliff Richard was fast and it was explosive. With a new name and a ton of ambition, he and his band, the Drifters, later known as the Shadows, started making noise. Their big break came in 1958 with Move It. The song was pure, raw energy. It was gritty, it was real, and it was completely electrifying. It's now seen as the first real British rock and roll hit, proving that the UK could bring the same swagger as the American stars. John Lennon himself famously said that, before Cliff Richard and the Shadows, there had been nothing worth listening to in British music. Coming from a Beatle, that's a massive statement, and it shows just how much Cliff changed the game. Move It shot to number 2 on the charts, and almost overnight, Cliff Richard was a sensation. He was Britain's first real teen idol, a homegrown answer to Elvis. With his smoldering good looks and gyrating hips, he had the nation's youth hooked. Hits like Living Doll, The Young Ones, and Summer Holiday kept him at the top of the charts, but all this fame came with a price. Cliff was thrown into a non-stop whirlwind of touring, recording, and TV appearances. He was the face of a generation, but his own life was anything but free. The pressure was unbelievable, and the scrutiny never stopped. Every move was watched, every word picked apart. While this time was thrilling, it was also his first real taste of how lonely fame can be. Looking back, he remembers the excitement, but also the seeds of the personal struggles that were to come. He was on top of the world, but he was also starting to learn the very personal cost of living your entire life in the public eye. By the mid-1960s, Cliff Richard had it all. He was a global superstar with more hits than he could count. But under the surface, he felt like something was missing. The rock and roll lifestyle, even though he was tamer than most, still felt hollow. He was looking for something more, something that screaming crowds and gold records just couldn't give him. This search led him to a decision that absolutely shocked the music world. In 1966, at the very height of his fame, Cliff publicly announced that he had become a Christian. This wasn't just a casual thing, it was a deep, life-changing conversion. In an era where rock and roll meant rebellion, declaring your faith was a truly radical move. A lot of people thought it was career suicide. The press was cynical, and even some of his fans just didn't get it. His faith was deeply influenced by the evangelist Billy Graham. This connection made his religious image even stronger, setting him completely apart from the hippie counterculture that was taking over. This was a massive gamble. He risked losing the very audience that had made him a star. In his memoir, he confesses how torn he was during this time. He was genuinely struggling to balance his two great loves, his music and his new faith. He even seriously thought about quitting pop music for good, thinking he couldn't be a rocker and a Christian at the same time. It was a choice between the identity the world gave him and the one he was finding for himself. In the end, he found a way to bring his two worlds together. He realized he could use his fame as a platform for what he saw as a greater purpose. He kept making pop hits, but he also started recording gospel albums and talking openly about his beliefs. The decision didn't end his career, it redefined it. It added a new layer to who he was and, in many ways, it's a key reason he's lasted so long. By choosing faith, he set himself on a unique path, showing a depth of character that would be essential for the challenges that were still to come. The decades after his spiritual awakening proved just how much staying power Cliff Richard had. While other stars from his era faded, Cliff just kept evolving and succeeding. The 70s brought a comeback with hits like Devil Woman and We Don't Talk Anymore. The 80s, 90s, and 2000s all delivered more hits and sold-out tours, cementing his status as a beloved national treasure. He worked with everyone from Olivia Newton-John to Elton John, proving he could stay relevant no matter how much music changed, but with this incredible career came constant, unending public curiosity. Because he never married, speculation about his private life, especially his sexuality, became a permanent fixture of his fame. The media was desperate for answers, but Cliff flat-out refused to discuss it. He built a powerful wall of privacy around his personal life, and this wasn't because he was ashamed or hiding anything. For him, it was a matter of principle. He has always argued that his personal life is just that, personal. He felt that being famous didn't mean he had to give up his right to privacy. In his memoir, he doesn't suddenly spill all his secrets to satisfy decades of gossip. Instead, he confesses his unshakable belief that some parts of your life should be sacred. This position was often twisted. Some called him evasive, which only added more fuel to the fire. But for Cliff, it was a necessary boundary to protect his own sanity. Understanding this fierce need for privacy is key to understanding the man. It shows his deep need to control his own story, a need that came from decades of having his life picked apart by strangers. He was happy to share his music and his faith, but he felt his heart was his own. And it's this fierce protection of his private self that makes what happened in 2014 so much more horrific. The nightmare that was waiting for him wasn't just an attack on his reputation. It was a brutal demolition of the one boundary he had spent his entire life defending. On August 14, 2014, That wall of privacy wasn't just breached, it was blown to pieces in the most public and humiliating way possible. While he was in Portugal, he got a call telling him police were about to raid his UK apartment. He turned on the TV in absolute horror. There it was, broadcast live for the world to see, a helicopter shot of police officers flooding his home. The BBC, tipped off by the police, was covering it like a breaking news spectacle. A ticker ran across the screen, announcing his home was being searched over a historical sexual assault allegation. In that instant, Cliff Richard's life was shattered. He was named and shamed before he'd even been asked a single question. The allegation, which he always fiercely denied, dated back to 1985. He was never arrested. He was never charged with a crime. But those crucial facts were completely buried under an avalanche of headlines. For the next 2 years, he lived in a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He's since confessed the full, devastating impact of this ordeal. This wasn't just a PR crisis, it was a deep trauma that broke him physically and emotionally. He suffered from depression and couldn't sleep properly for 4 years. The stress caused a severe case of shingles that spread across his head and face. His doctors warned him that if it reached his eyes, he could go blind. He remembers waking up with his heart pounding, terrified he was about to have a heart attack. He admits to feeling a violent hatred for his accuser, a feeling that scared him and went against the Christian faith that had supported him for so long. The headlines were brutal. One in particular burned into his memory: Sir Cliff molests underage boy. Not allegedly. It was stated as a fact. He felt like he'd been hung out to dry, his reputation destroyed in a second. His home, his sanctuary, now felt violated. The internet became a permanent record of his shame. He knew he was innocent, his friends knew it, and he believed God knew it, but the world was being told a completely different story. In June 2016, prosecutors announced no charges would be brought. He was completely exonerated. He later won a landmark privacy case against the BBC, with the judge calling their coverage sensationalist and a serious violation of his rights. But even with the legal win, the damage was done. The nightmare was over, but the confession of its true cost was just beginning. So, what is the massive confession at the center of Cliff Richard's story? It's not some dirty secret the tabloids have been hunting for. The title, "He Was Massive," points to something much deeper. The massive confession Cliff lays bare is the sheer, soul-crushing weight of injustice. It's a confession of how massive the betrayal felt, from a police force and a public broadcaster that worked together to publicize a false allegation. It's a confession of how massive the physical and psychological toll was, pushing him to the edge of collapse. And it's a confession of how massive the battle was to reclaim his name in a world where the "no smoke without fire" attitude can stick to an innocent person forever. But maybe most importantly, it's a confession of the massive, unshakable forces that helped him survive. He confesses that his Christian faith was the single most important thing that got him through it. He talks about praying every night, not for revenge, but for the strength to keep going. It was this spiritual resilience that stopped him from being totally consumed by anger and despair. He also confesses how massively important his friends and family were. They rallied around him, creating a shield against the public attacks. Their absolute belief in his innocence was his lifeline. He says the experience taught him the true meaning of loyalty and love in a way that decades of fame never could. His memoir is the final act in this massive reclamation of his life. The book isn't just a collection of memories, it's his truth. By weaving together his life story with his music, he reasserts his identity, not as a victim, but as an artist, a survivor, and a man of faith. He is taking back control of the story that was so brutally stolen from him. His decision to campaign for a change in the law, to give anonymity to people accused of sexual offenses unless they are charged, is another part of this confession. He recognizes his ordeal was bigger than just him. He knows how a false allegation has the massive potential to destroy a life, and he's fighting to make sure others don't suffer the same public crucifixion he did. the massive confession, then, is really one of resilience. It's the story of a man who was publicly broken but refused to be privately defeated. At 84, he's not just looking back, he's standing tall, his head full of music, his spirit intact, and his story is finally, completely, his own. The ordeal Sir Cliff Richard went through raises some big questions about justice, the media, and the idea of being innocent until proven guilty. What do you think about his story? Do you believe the law should be changed to grant anonymity to people accused of crimes before they're charged? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Cliff Richard's journey is a story of incredible highs and devastating lows. It's the story of Harry Webb, the boy from India who fell in love with American rock and roll and became a British icon. It's the story of a superstar who risked his entire career for his faith, and in doing so, found a deeper purpose that would guide him for the rest of his life. And ultimately, it's the story of a man who faced the greatest trial of his life, a false accusation that threatened to wipe out a lifetime of integrity. His confessions reveal not a hidden darkness, but a hidden strength. The massive weight of that nightmare didn't crush him, it revealed a resilience forged over decades of navigating the pressures of fame. His memoir isn't just about setting the record straight, it's a powerful statement about legacy. It shows that you aren't defined by the accusations thrown at you, but by how you respond, with grace, courage, and a fierce commitment to the truth. At 84, Cliff Richard isn't fading away. He's still touring, still recording, and still connecting with the fans who've stood by him for generations. He survived the scandal, took back his story, and cemented his legacy not just as one of Britain's greatest hitmakers, but as a symbol of incredible endurance and quiet dignity. His life proves that even after the darkest storm, the music can, and will, play on.